Hi, everyone. We're going to give people just one moment to jump on. We have a lot of information we want to cover today. All right. Well, we want to make sure we keep this within our allotted time. So we're just going to jump right in. I'm Jamie, Client Services Manager at Key Media Solutions.
And I am Ren, an account executive here.
Thanks for joining us. Today, we really want to walk through a recent project that we worked on with a national mortgage lender. Rather than simply just showing you the results, we want to talk through the thinking behind the strategy and why certain decisions were made and what made such a difference. One thing that we always tell clients is that successful digital marketing isn't about adding more tactics. It's about making sure that every tactic has a purpose and that they're all working together towards the same goal.
That's right. And that's really what this project became. The client had digital advertising in place already, but they wanted to generate more qualified loan applications during one of the most challenging mortgage markets in recent years. So we started by asking, is your current strategy giving us the visibility and the control that we need to make the confident marketing decisions? And that question ultimately kind of shaped everything that followed after.
So, before we talk through the solution, it's important to understand what the client was really up against. This was a national mortgage lender serving an underserved minority population. Their goal was to increase qualified loan applications, but they were really operating in a market where interest rates were at record highs and available mortgage products were very limited. Um, Naturally, borrowers were taking more time to make decisions. Those market conditions meant every advertising dollar would really need to work harder for them.
Yeah, so then we evaluated the account and we found that the challenge wasn't just generating traffic. There was a larger issue at play, which was understanding what was actually producing the results. The campaign structures were very broad and the conversion tracking wasn't exactly complete. And so it made it difficult to clearly connect the advertising spend back to the measurable business outcomes. And without that kind of visibility, it makes optimization decisions become much more difficult just because you don't have a complete picture of the customer's behavior.
And one area that really stood out was the existing use of Performance Max campaigns. For anyone who's not familiar with Performance Max, it's Google's automated campaign type that allows advertisers to reach people across multiple Google properties. That includes search, display, YouTube, Gmail, Discover, and Maps, all within a single campaign. Instead of creating separate campaigns for each channel, advertisers can provide goals, creative assets, audience signals, and a budget. Google's automation then determines where those ads are delivered based on the likelihood of achieving the campaign's goal.
Yes, and this automation is absolutely valuable. It simplifies the whole campaign management and can help us as advertisers uncover the opportunities across Google's entire network. However, because it's multiple channels that are managed together, we generally have a little bit less visibility in how each individual placement is contributing to the overall performance compared to running separate campaigns.
Yep. And in this client situation, the campaigns were optimizing across both search and display while over delivering budget to underperforming display placements that contributed to a higher cost per acquisition and really inconsistent results. For anyone who's unfamiliar with that metric, CPA or a cost per acquisition is the average amount of advertising spend required to generate your desired action. In this case, it's qualified loan applications and other measurable lead activity. So when your CPA is high, that generally means that you're spending more to acquire each one of those leads.
Yes, and another challenge was just the lack of clearly defined full funnel strategy. And now you hear this term a lot in digital marketing. So really, it just recognizes that not every customer is at the same stage of their buying journey. Some people are just becoming aware of a company, which is kind of that awareness. Others are researching options, and then there's some who are ready to take action, which is really where your conversions come into play. And different marketing channels often perform better at different stages. So you need to understand each channel's role and how it becomes incredibly important. And really, without that structure, it becomes just so much harder to understand what's creating the awareness, to what's generating interest, and then ultimately to what's leading to your conversions.
With those challenges identified, our first priority wasn't launching new campaigns. It was rebuilding the strategy around the borrower's intent. Borrower intent simply refers to how ready somebody is to take action. For example, someone searching mortgage options for the first time has very different needs than someone actively searching for a lender to prepare to apply for a mortgage. Understanding that difference allows marketing to become much more relevant.
And that idea just became the foundation for how we structured every channel. Rather than asking each platform to accomplish the same objective, each channel was given a specific role within the customer's journey. So, for example, search campaigns focus on reaching the borrowers, demonstrating that higher intent, people who were actively looking for mortgage related information. And then we had another like display and video campaigns focused on just building upon that awareness and keeping the lender visible earlier in the decision making process.
And that's an important distinction because it's easy to evaluate every channel using the exact same metrics, but that's not always the best approach. A display ad may introduce someone to your brand. A search ad may capture that same person's interest weeks later when they're actually looking for mortgage solutions. Those channels are working together, even though they're accomplishing different jobs.
And another important part of the strategy was just the audience segmentation. And that just means dividing a broader audience into smaller groups based on characteristics, behaviors, or goals, just their demographics, really. And so instead of delivering just one generic message to every potential borrower, messaging was then tailored to the different borrower goals and the different stages of the journey. This improved the relevance because people are then receiving information that's just more aligned with where they're at and what they're doing within that decision making process.
Organic social content also supported that strategy by reinforcing the top of the funnel messaging alongside the paid campaigns. While each channel had its own responsibility, they all were working together towards the same objective. And that was creating a more consistent experience for potential borrowers, regardless of where they had encountered the brand or the ad.
And once that strategy was in place, the next step really was implementation. At that point, we weren't changing the overall goal anymore. We were making sure every campaign supported the role it was supposed to play.
Search campaigns were refined to better capture borrowers who are actively looking for mortgage solutions, while display and video continued supporting awareness earlier in that journey. Instead of expecting every channel to drive the same outcome, each one had a clearly defined responsibility.
Yes, and like we said earlier, we need to create plans for our goals. And this is really important because someone who's beginning to research their options is usually looking for different information than someone who's ready to choose a lender. So matching that messaging to those different stages just created a more relevant experience.
Measurement is another major focus, or it was a major focus in this campaign. We expanded tracking beyond a single lead action so we could capture the form submissions, phone calls, and even email clicks. That gave us a lot more complete picture of how people were interacting with the campaign.
And this was really where the optimization becomes so much more effective. Instead of just making these broad assumptions, we could evaluate the performance using the more complete data and just really make informed adjustments over time.
And then once we had those changes in place, we started seeing improvements across multiple performance metrics. The tracked cost per acquisition was reduced by a lot, meaning that the campaigns were generating desired actions much more efficiently.
Yes, and we also saw the click-through rate improve from 17.4%, which was already great, to an even better 25.7%. And this indicated a stronger engagement with the ads and the messaging.
And then perhaps most importantly, the campaign generated between 250 and 400 qualified loan applications every month. The website leads alone were increased by over 30% year over year.
And that's really what we're working toward from the beginning. Those metrics weren't just individual wins for us, they reflected a strategy where the campaign structure, the audience targeting, and the creative, along with measurement, were all working together.
So I guess if there's one takeaway from this, didn't come from adding more tactics or even increasing the budget. It really came from taking the time to build out a strategy where every marketing channel had a purpose and every decision was backed by data.
Exactly. So when your audience, campaign structure, messaging, and measurement are aligned, you're in a much better position to optimize your performance over time. And so we hope this gave you some insight into how we approach digital strategy here at Key Media Solutions and how a thoughtful media plan can really create meaningful business results.
We appreciate you joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. As always, you can reach out to either Ren or I directly. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Have a good day.